Hi, Gary.
Hello.
Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much for having me on.
I think the place where most people kind of started to find out about you was through your Doodle a Day series. How did Doodle a Day start?
Doodle a Day started, oh God, about four years ago, 5 years ago now. Oh, I've lost track of how long it was. 54th birthday, 55th birthday. Yeah, about 5 years ago. And in my job, as an animator, illustrator, stuff like that, I'm drawing all day, every day. But in the last few years, obviously, I'm drawing on a Cintiq tablet, which is a screen that you draw on with a funky pen. It's electric paper, basically, with an undo button and all that sort of thing, which is wonderful for work. But I realised I'd sort of lost touch with the essential side of drawing, the scratch of the pen on the paper, the smell of the ink, the fact that if you're working in ink, you can't rub it out, that sort of thing. And I decided that I wanted to do like a drawing every day. And I thought, well, if I just sort of decide I'm going to do that, it's not going to happen. The discipline will drop. So I decided to make it like a diary, like last thing at night. The last thing I'd do each day would be do a drawing that related to something that had either happened or I'd read or whatever that day. So I started doing that, and I just posted them online just for the hell of it, just for fun, with my friends and stuff used to look and comment or whatever. The sort of the couple of hundred people that used to follow that in those days, sort of thing, or whatever, and it was fun. And so that became part of my daily routine. And I would sit there at the night and do a drawing, show my wife. We'd have a laugh. The kids would come down the next morning. What was yesterday's drawing, Dad? Were we in it? So that was how it started, really. And then
were those drawings for? Were you putting them out onto social media for to gain a following, or was it just?
No, I've never seen. I know to the point, or was never into getting a following. It didn't bother me. I've got a job. I get paid. I just put them out there because I thought people might find them amusing, because a lot of them were funny or whatever. So I thought my friends who follow me, if it was the old days, you'd show them the sketchbook when they visited your house. Oh, I did these the other day. This is fun. But it was like you could just put it out there and people could comment on it, and sometimes they would appear in it. So it was literally just to communicate with my mates and the very small number of people I didn't know who followed me or whatever on Twitter. So that's the only reason for putting them out there. And also it was a good place to sort of you got them in a sketchbook, but if you lose the sketchbook, it's gone. So putting them out there meant they were digitally safe as well. So it was another reason for doing it, really. So it was just a fun thing to do, and that was the main reason for it.
And how did you decide what to draw every day?
I would literally, you'd sit at night and watching the TV, and it's I'm heading towards bedtime. So I would just have that to get a little bit 21st century modern, but a mindfulness moment. You'd sit there and go, what happened today? Did something funny happen? And you'd rethink your day. You'd be thinking through, and it was quite a nice way to sort of just go back over what had happened that day.
Yeah.
Or I read that thing that really touched a chord. And oftentimes what would happen is during the day, if someone said something or I saw something, I'd jot it down on my phone in my notes on my phone in case I forgot. And I still do this, so that occasionally you have a day when nothing happens, especially when, like me, you work from home and you've not seen anybody or done anything apart from work, and that's the world's most boring drawing. So
Yeah.
I have a sort of a sort of bank of things that have happened that are non-day specific, if you like. So quite often it's a thing that's happened that day. I mean, I would say 95% of the time the drawing has been related to that day. But just occasionally you've had one of those days, so I can dip into the bank and go, well, that's a universal thing, I'll use that one. They're all things that have actually happened, but they're not necessarily... I'm not sure I understand. Oh, shut up, Siri. They're not necessarily that day.
Would you ever go out and do anything just because you're like, oh, I haven't got anything to draw today, I'm going to go and do something fun so I can draw it?
No, that was part of I had a self-imposed brief. When I began it, I gave myself a brief. The brief was, whatever is in the drawing has to be real, has to have happened, and has to have been genuine and spontaneous. It was never a playing to the audience kind of thing. Even in its original incarnation, obviously things have changed, but we'll come on to that. But it was never, what would people like to see? It was always, that was one of my deals. The other self-imposed brief were no pre-drawing, no sketching first, straight in with the pen. has to go straight in with the pen. And if you make a mistake, incorporate it. Try not to take longer than 15 minutes to do the drawing. Those are the sort of the rules I gave myself, which I have always stuck to.
How important is discipline for you?
In work, generally.
Just in life?
I think it's very important, especially when you're self-employed and work from home like I do. There is an element of discipline that you really, really need to incorporate. Having said that, rules are there to be bent and broken occasionally, otherwise you'd go insane. And so discipline is important to me. I start work at a specific time. I come out here, I work, I take my breaks when I need to. I try to stop at a certain time. And then obviously I don't always. But if I don't, I've allowed myself not to. I couldn't do what I do and do the amount of things I do if I didn't have some kind of discipline and routine. And the same applies to the kids. I say to them, especially during this lockdown that we're in at the moment, which I'm sure is part of what we'll come on to, they have a discipline and routine. I worked out a timetable, which we have on the wall, which is a kind of guide. And it's like, you've got to do your bits of schoolwork in the day. Initially, it was like, right, from 10 to 12, you do this, then you do that. Now it's like, look, get these things done today. I don't care when you do them. But by the end of the day, if you haven't done them, you will keep going until you do. But take your breaks and learn your own discipline. Learn, I can do this, then I can take a break, but I've got to go back to it. And if I haven't done it, Dad's going to make me keep doing it till tea time and I won't get some fun in the afternoon, So I think teaching yourself a discipline that you can stick to is kind of important. Otherwise, I know personally I wouldn't get anything done.
And do you use any kind of like time planning in terms of like how you schedule your time during the day? I have my calendar. I'm a Apple person, so I've got all my calendar on my phone, my iPad, my computer, and I use that. I know people use the Google Calendar, whatever, but so I use my calendar that goes across all the devices, and I do have the day, kind of all the things I need to do in that day that are outside my regular program, if you like. I'll do this at that point. That goes into that diary, which goes everywhere and pings up so that I've got all the warnings set up. Otherwise, again, I'm incredibly busy and I would forget to do things. So I've got that. I've got digital post-it notes all over my computer with lists on. I've got not only the calendar, but my notes have lists. I mean, I live by lists. And I have lists to say, look at your list. It really... and they're useful. And I know that I will never get everything done on the list. I put everything on there that I want to achieve. And I know that it won't all happen, and it won't all happen today. Like it says, things to do today. But my things to do today list has got things on it that have been on there for a year. But that's okay, because they'll get done today, one day, So, the discipline and the lists are important, but I don't get, suicidal if I actually don't get everything done on it.
Yeah. One question we were asked by a listener recently that we're unable to answer because we're not parents. But someone was asking for advice for balancing career and parenting. And as like a single parent now, I would imagine obviously takes a toll on time that you have to spend on work.
It really does. And there's a couple of factors involved in that. One is working for people who are understanding of your situation. And luckily, I've been very lucky ever since my wife died, which is obviously something that will come up in this conversation. The people I have worked with have been incredibly understanding that my time isn't theirs, but that they know that if I get the work done, they don't mind when I get it done. Do you see what I mean? And also the other factor is having kids that are that fit in with that. Well, I'm very lucky. My kids are not problematic children. They're good kids, and they don't demand a lot of my time. They're of an age. They were 7 and 10 when my wife died. They're now 10 and 12. So they are of an age where they're quite self-reliant. So during lockdown, for instance, I set them up in the morning, and then I can go in and check when I have my little walk around breaks to stop my legs seizing up, make sure they're doing okay. But I can basically leave them for their working day in the house. I'm only in the back garden. I'm literally just a shout away, but I can let them get on with it. And if they want me, they'll come and get me. So if I had younger children or children that maybe had more problems or demands, I think it would be an incredibly difficult thing. But going back to that discipline thing, I've instilled in them, look, we have to get these things done at this time. And I say to them sometimes, are you okay if I go out and work for a couple of hours now? I've got to do that. Are you going to be all right? You got things to do? Yeah, fine. I'm there if you need me. So it's a bit of a give and take, but yeah, it does impact. I mean, you know, previously I could work all the hours that there were because, you know, my wife would be looking after them, whatever, or she'd be working while I'd look after them. And now I have to sort of say, no, that's it. So I get out in the studio between 8 and 9 or whatever, and I will work solidly through till about 3, working flat out. And then I try to stop around about 3 or 4 rather than working till 5 or 6. And if it didn't get it done today, I'll get it done tomorrow, or I'll come back out here tonight when they're in bed and I'll get it done then. So yeah, flexibility is important in that, I think.
So you mentioned there your wife tragically passed away far too early. She was young, and that's obviously had life-changing, like everything probably, I would imagine, crashed down around you. But one way that it appears to me that you dealt with the grief was by not quitting Doodle a Day, and by actually exploring some of the stuff that you were going through within those cartoons.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the only day I didn't do a drawing was the day I was flying home. I was in Canada when she was taken ill, and I flew home. But by the time I arrived home, she'd already died. And the only time I didn't draw was the time I was on the overnight flight. So the day I got home and discovered that she died, I still drew that night because it was part of who I am now, and I had to. And it was a way that I could just get the feeling out. And that became something very important to me. That doing the drawings, looking back on your day, became a very different thing than it had been, the day before.
Yeah.
So, but it was a way of processing what went on, and a way of recognizing when humor returned, which happened very quickly as well. And it made me realize very quickly how important drawing was to me and to other people, and what a great communicator it is. And that's the thing that one of the big changes that happened is that suddenly strangers started following because they picked up on it, and it just went crazy, and the numbers went through the roof, whatever, and suddenly it became a bit of a thing. And going back to an earlier question, at that point I had to be very, very strict with myself not to play to the crowd. Once I suddenly realized there were followers, which was the thing. I had followers, I had fans, and it was like, how does that happen? That's something I wasn't expecting. But I was very strict on myself that I never sort of said, oh, they like it when I do those sort of pictures, therefore I'm going to do them. I still had to keep it what happened, because what they did relate to mostly was the normality, was the everyday, was the relatable. So if I stopped doing that, it didn't become what it was. So that became a point, and it became clear to me that the power of drawing to affect people's emotions, to help them, people who were going through something similar, suddenly realized they weren't alone, or saw me do a drawing that articulated for them something they hadn't been able to put into words. And it made me realize just how powerful a tool drawing can be.
Yeah, when you were
you never have to sort of pussyfoot around any difficult questions. If you've got questions about the grief side of things, by the way, it's fine.
You're really open and honest in all the interviews, which is lovely. My girlfriend and I were listening to the Carrie Lloyd one the other day, and I cried the first time I listened to it, and she was in floods of tears because I was re-listening to it. So
that was lovely. Carrie's fab. She's amazing. She's done so much for opening up about talking about grief. She's brilliant.
Yeah, she has. So with the drawings, I suppose it's the stuff that you're putting out. People are relating to it because it's stuff that's never been said. Or I feel like we have problems with dealing with grief, and we don't really share very well with it. And I think probably, I mean, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I mean specifically men that are not very open about sharing their feelings.
This is the feedback I get, and a lot of the thing I have a certain kind of profile to which I appear to fit. I mean, I'm a late middle-aged beardy man. I look like the sort of bloke who would be down the pub talking about football and not mentioning his emotions. So for someone like myself to sort of open up and talk about feelings, people have found that helpful, I think, and it is something that I think we're getting better slowly, but it is traditionally, we're taught, the stiff upper lip, the British, being British about it, and real men don't cry and all that bollocks. It's like, it's not true. It takes a lot more courage to cry in front of somebody than it does not to. And I think that's, but it's not courage. It only takes courage because, people don't expect you to. If you can do it, it's so much healthier. And that's the thing that I try to sort of say to people is, talking about the grief, and in my case, drawing through it and stuff like that. It's such a healthy thing because it's venting the pressure cooker. It's letting out those little pieces of emotion. It's getting it out there. And there's nothing worse than holding in feelings, pent up emotions. And being able to do that through art is an extraordinary gift. I'm lucky in that respect.
Has there ever been times where you've thought, what I'm drawing here is too personal to me that I don't want to share it?
If I felt it was, I wouldn't do it, I think. What I have done, occasionally there's been things I haven't drawn when it's involved the kids, if I thought, no, that's too much. But all the times where the children turn up, especially in the ones where the children are relating to the grief, I have often said to them, guys, is it okay if I do that as my drawing? And they've always said, yeah. If they ever say, not really, I won't. So I've always sought their permission for them to appear in the serious stories. In the comedy drawings, I don't ask them because they're kids being silly, and they're fine with that. Trust me, they're very fine with that. Am I in it, Dad? Yeah, all right. God. Should I do a thing? No, don't perform for the doodle. But yeah, for the sort of the deeper, more, the emotional side of things, for them I ask. For me, it's almost like if it's deeply personal, that's kind of important. I guess maybe I am playing to the gallery a bit there. I don't know, but I just think it's an important thing to say. And if I was feeling like that, and my friend was sitting on my sofa, I'd be telling them I was feeling that. Yeah. So it's a kind of bigger version of doing that. It's a bigger version of telling your mate. So in that respect, I'm just being honest still in it, and I think that is the thing that is important to do. So
I suppose it's working out how you best how you are best creative, and that can be the channel through which you're able to deal with things. Because certainly, like when I am feeling sad, if I start painting, then that does make me feel better. And I'd have spoken before about kind of mental health and creativity being really intrinsically linked. And I suppose that I suppose it's find the method and go for it. And rather than just sitting there, it's like, it's taking action, I suppose. So
exactly. I've had this conversation with people. So people say, oh, I love it, but I can't draw. I say, well, it doesn't have to be drawing. Do you bake? Bake your way through. Do you like running? Run your way through. Do a thing that you like to do, that helps you express yourself, whatever that thing may be, and channel your feelings of grief into that. And if there's ways to sort of share that with other people, that's great. If it's just for yourself, that's great too. But the worst thing is to sit there and bottle it up. Let it out in whatever way. Bake grief cakes, as I say. Do whatever. Just do a thing.
Yeah. And I suppose like even if it is just writing it down, like that is still a thing.
Simply writing it down, or do a drawing. You don't have to show everybody. Do them for yourself. There's no such thing as a bad drawing. Every drawing is just a part on the learning curve of what to draw next time or whatever. And if you're drawing for yourself, then every drawing is completely valid. It doesn't have to look like Michelangelo. It doesn't have to look like Chris Riddell. It doesn't. It's just stick men are fine. If the stick men help you express yourself, just do it.
Has it surprised you how many people have reached out to you?
It's insane. Yes, it took my breath away. I mean, when it first started happening, it went crazy the day there was a newspaper article came out, and my phone started making all these weird noises. I go, what the hell's that? And it was notifications saying, oh, this has happened, that has happened. I was like, oh God, so I had to switch that off because it was just buzzing constantly. And then my mate said to me, have you looked at your numbers? Look at your number. And I went onto Twitter or whatever it was, and the little number at the bottom that says followers was rolling like a counter. And it was like, oh, that's just weird. So that was very strange, and it took for a couple of days that happened, and then it sort of leveled out, but it kept going up, and then it leveled out. And then there was another one when I did the one show, and I think at that point I was at about 10,000 followers when I went into the building. By the time I got on the bus going home, I was at 17,000, and it was just like, what the hell's, and then it's just every time something it just kept growing, and it's now at like 56,000 or something, which is I just find that bizarre and wonderful. It's wonderful that there's that many people who are interested in following these crazy scribbles that I do, and I know that most of them follow because it touched them emotionally in some way. They don't follow because they admire a great artist, or they, you know, or whatever, or some fantastic comedian, or somebody they want to be who's on the telly. They're following because these funny little scribbles have touched an emotional chord, and I think that's a really nice feeling. And I get lovely messages from people, you know, just saying thank you, or, you know, we're going through that, or, oh, my I get messages from people saying, I've been following you for a while, and then last week my wife died, and it's given me so much comfort. And you just think, wow, that's an incredible thing. You know, how lucky we are to live in an age where we can do this, and we can be of use to people. You know, I just draw. It's not a really useful job in terms of, you know, it's not life. I never thought of it before as being a job that was an important job. I always said to people, I'm not a bloody heart surgeon. I'm not, you know, I don't build things for people. I just draw. But I realize now that it's actually quite important to a lot of people. And that's quite a humbling thing to suddenly realize when you're my age, you know.
I think as well, it's not like you're just drawing, you're telling a story with that. It's not like you're just drawing here's an inanimate object.
Yeah.
Every time there's like a narrative to it.
Yeah, I guess the doodle a day stuff, you know, there is a narrative, and there is a life story happening there. I've almost become my own soap. I don't know, but it's kind of like, yes, there is. And within there, there's like my fitness journey or my health journey is alongside, and the single parenting. So there's a multiple set of journeys going on there, which different people can relate to different aspects of the drawings, I guess. And there was a famous book written back in the Victorian era called The Diary of a Nobody by George Grossmith. It was he was an actor, used to appear in Gilbert and Sullivan plays, and he wrote a book called Diary of a Nobody, which is literally what it says. It's just a diary of a nobody. And I think of this as a kind of, you know, my version of Diary of a Nobody. I'm just a bloke who happens to have lost his wife and happens to be able to draw. But that's the only thing that sets me aside, if you like, from 99% or whatever, is the fact I've got this facility to do a bit of drawing. But on top of that, I'm just me. I'm just this bloke with all my problems, with all my foibles and mistakes. And I just like people to know that it's okay to be a bit out of shape and a bit wrong, or struggle to do a thing that doesn't quite work, or your kids are driving you nuts, or, you know, and yeah, it's just a sort of record of a normal life, really. I guess that is what people are tapping into.
So what would you say to someone who maybe isn't getting started in what they want to do because they think I'm just not interesting enough?
Just do it. I mean, yeah, it depends what you want out of it. I mean, you asked a question earlier about, did I do a thing to get followers? And it was like, no. And I've never have wanted to get followers, and I've for the sake of getting followers. I like the fact that people follow because it's good for them. Nothing, it's not monetized, this thing. You know, I don't have a thing, or if I don't get X amount of followers, I don't get my I don't even know how it works in monetizing. I don't know what it does. I don't know how people say, have you monetized it? I say, I don't even know how that works. I get paid to do my job. That's fine. This is something I do because it's fun and I want to do it and it helps people. But if people want to get started, but they think I'm not interesting enough, are you interesting to you? Do you find your life interesting, or do you find you want to remember? That's the most important thing for me. The thing I look back on when I look back through the diaries, if you like, the books, is you remember those days, and you remember them so lovely and clearly. You look back and go, oh, that was that day when we tried to climb the trees on those ropes and I felt like a Christmas decoration. Or, you know, just hanging there in a rope feeling like a sack of potatoes, and everyone else was going up above me and going, come on, Dad. I'm like, and I'd have forgotten that day I'd have probably blanked it if I hadn't drawn it down, you know. And just little things like that you can look back on, and it's a record of a life. We all take our pictures on our phones of our things that have happened, and they're fine, but they are a frozen moment, aren't they?
Yeah.
The thing about a drawing is you've thought about it, you've drawn it, so an emotion has gone into the drawing at the same time, and you remember that feeling when you drew it. And so it doesn't have to be a fabulous drawing. As long as you know what you've drawn. You could do a drawing that someone else looks at and goes, I don't know what that is. You go, yeah, but I do. I know what that is, and that's what matters to me. So I think that's the important thing.
I suppose it's like with a gratitude practice, people always talk about that once you do your gratitude practice, then throughout the day, you're looking for things to feel grateful for. And I suppose it would be the same with you. It's like, do you notice life more now? Because those little things that are seemingly innocuous, because a lot of...
Yes, I think I do.
Just around the normal.
Yeah, exactly. And the normal is something that people find, interesting. And yeah, I mean, often, if a thing happens that is slightly out of the ordinary, or a really particular phrase that one of my kids says, or a thing happens, I'll write it down in the phone. It doesn't happen every day. So that becomes part of the mindfulness practice, if you like, of sitting there in front of the telly of the evening with your little drink and watching your program, and then going, oh, it's doodle time. And then just going, think back through the day. Oh yeah, that happened, and that was a nice thing. And oh yeah, that always happens, doesn't it? And you're suddenly thinking back through your day, and you're just unpacking it a little bit, and then something will strike you. That's something I want to remember, and then it goes down. So it's like there are sometimes the specifics go, yeah, that's got to go down because that was fun. You remember it, you draw it. But sometimes like I'd quite like to remember that feeling of a thing that happened that felt really normal at the time, even consciously in the day. Perhaps you haven't noticed it, it's just gone by, and it's when you sit in the evening and you're unpacking the day in your head, you go, oh, that feeling, and that one goes down. So yeah, I've kind of lost where the question was at the beginning. I think I've just talked myself in a circle, but I think that
do you ever have it where you've had two great things that have happened in one day and you have to pick between them, or do you then draw both?
I've very rarely done both. Just once in a while I've done both. If they've been related, I've done both. There's a few doodles in the series of doodles where two things have happened that kind of echoed each other or were similar, or two very similar things happened at separate parts of the day, and I've done that. Otherwise, if two things have happened and one of them is perhaps not particularly, it doesn't matter that I don't get it out that day, then that'll go in the bank.
Okay.
For those days when, as I say, those days I've literally come out here, drawn, gone in there, and that was it, and you go, well, that's a day that, and there have been, I think literally in the early days, there was one doodle I did, which was a picture of me going, well, nothing happened. But apart from that, yeah, there's usually something you can find.
Now that you do have this following, do you feel kind of a responsibility to them to keep producing daily?
I not really. I mean, I feel grateful to them that they're there, and the fact that they are there spurs me on to do it maybe on the days when I might have gone, oh, I can't be asked today. Yeah. Because when a couple of times when I actually did miss one, because I got home really late if I'd been out or something. Remember going out? I got out really late and I came back in and I was so tired I couldn't draw, so I drew it the next morning. And I had messages me going, are you all right? We didn't see your post and we weren't sure you're okay. And I go, blimey, okay. There are people actually worrying about me because I didn't post. So that made me go, okay, there is a responsibility in a way to do it for that. But I still do it for me, not for them. And in actual fact, I find it very difficult, impossible, to go to bed if I haven't done it. It starts about 11 o'clock. There's this little voice in my head starts saying, "You got the sketchbook out? You need to, because it's time to unpack." I did make a conscious decision once that I started realizing I was getting a lot of followers, and saw the profile of my followers and realized that there isn't a profile. They go right across the board from, both ends of the political spectrum, the social spectrum, the gender spectrum. There is no pattern. And there's some very interesting people that do follow. And so one of the decisions I made quite early on was no politics. I'm not going to, I used to occasionally do a little political thing, something that made me go, ugh, that day. I would do a little political cartoon, usually a comedy one, but still a sort of comedy rant. But I decided, no, there's enough politics out there. Yeah. that's not who I'm about. I'm not about that anymore. So I decided to not touch on that. I still touch occasionally, lightly on, no, not religion, spirituality, I suppose I touch on. Religion is the other thing I sort of don't really comment on. But I will touch on spirituality a little bit. And interestingly, and mine, as you can probably see, there's a sort of pagan quality to what I believe in and stuff like that. And but that hasn't. I get some lovely comments back from the people that are, that are Christian or Muslim or whatever who follow me, and they've never seemed to be offended by it. They always are quite interested, and it's really nice, that because I don't bang a drum about any kind of belief. I just sort of, occasionally I like the wheel of the year, the turning of the wheel of the year, and I like occasionally to just mark the points in the year that we're at, but I don't sort of take it much further than that when it comes to those. So I took out the contentious side of perhaps what one might doodle about, almost as a courtesy, because I want it to be a nice place. I like the fact that the people that follow are nice people and say nice things to each other and me. And there's enough people that are just horrible on social media as it is, and I don't want to be part of that. So I try to cultivate, there's negative stuff when I'm feeling down or when it's about grief, but that's different to being horrible.
Totally, yeah.
And so that's important.
On the internet, we have these little pockets, and as soon as you enter a space online, My
apologies. Sorry, I have the world's most sensitive Siri.
I think you find those pockets online, and as soon as you enter one of those spaces, you realize, okay, this is a space where I know this is tolerated and this is not tolerated, and you can kind of read the rules of the space that you're interacting with straight away. So and I have very defensive followers as well, and I mean in the early days I think I got trolled by one guy who just said something quite spiteful about what I was doing or whatever, and he just got jumped. And I mean, the thing is, I just went, oh, whatever, delete, block. I don't, it's just some keyboard warrior sitting in his mum's basement being an arsehole. So you just think, right, I'm gonna get rid of you, And then there was somebody who slightly misread, I think, one of my drawings once on Instagram, and she sort of commented on something that I'd done, which was a little bit, it was a sort of in gender politics, if you like. And I think everyone else said, have you looked at Gary's thing? That's not what he thinks at all. You're getting this. And she actually apologized. I went, I'm so sorry I got this wrong. And I answered her saying, it's totally understood. It's forgiven and forgotten. And then everyone jumped on that and going, oh, this is amazing. And it was like, it got a nice, and then that person now is one of the people that says lots of lovely things to me. So I think that's the other thing. People can just sort of knee-jerk react to stuff, and if people just try to understand, tone is difficult to read in a typing.
Yeah,
you can't type tone. You can put as many emojis as you like or whatever, but it doesn't really help. And I think that's the thing that some people forget. They try to make a joke, and you go, "Oh, don't do jokes." That wasn't a good idea. And so I try to keep a friendly space.
When it comes to the spirituality stuff, it's no matter on what your beliefs, I really just like the way that you depict Joy watching over, and just because her presence will always be there, whether or not you believe in an afterlife or that she's actually physically watching, her is there. So and you draw that.
And it's that feeling. What I'm drawing is a feeling. I'm not drawing for, I mean, I don't believe she is there in any kind of way, like a sort of, Jedi Force ghost or whatever, glowing. And that's how I draw her, because it's a shorthand for that. But I've always said, and I know I talk to my children about this, no one's ever truly gone if you still hold a piece of them inside you. As long as you remember somebody, they're still with you. And that's what I'm depicting in those, is it's her memory, it's the knowing what she would be doing at that moment, and that's why she crops up how she does in those particular ones where she turns up. It's because I feel that feeling of, oh, she'd be feeling this right now, and they never go. You love somebody as much as I loved her. There's always a huge piece of them still inside you, and we knew each other so well that I know exactly what she'd be saying or thinking in everything that happens with us. So sometimes you just have to put that down, because that extra person to back, it's one of the things that goes when you lose somebody like that. You lose that person you bounce off of, which is one of the hardest things I found about being, you know, a widower initially, was not having that extra set of ears to bounce ideas. But when you know somebody as well as I knew her, you can sort of virtually do that by going, you can have that conversation and fill in her side as well.
Yeah.
And I kind of still do that. So it's a way of actually showing that visually, I guess. It's a visual shorthand for that internal monologue.
I think that's so lovely, because really all we can hope for on this planet and during this like very short, weird thing called life is, I suppose, legacy. And for me, when I was younger, like as a graffiti artist, that I was definitely searching for like that some kind of legacy, and it was so misplaced and misguided that only now, as an older person, I can look back on that and just realize I do still have that kind of need to create a legacy and leave a legacy. But I think the most beautiful thing you can do is Joy was obviously an incredible person, that if you can just touch someone enough that they can forward that legacy for you.
Yeah. And you know, you've tapped into exactly something I said to my daughter. I mean, so when I've been an artist, been a professional artist, and you know, one of the things when you do this as a job is, you know, that when you're gone, your work will still be around, and you know, 5 people might remember it, or 500 or 5,000 or 5, you know, whatever. And I do a lot of work in private eye, stuff like that. So I knew that was out there, you know, that buzz of knowing that people who don't know me know my stuff was a great thing to think, oh, there's a legacy and whatever. And you think, and then working in TV and stuff like that and doing cartoons, you go, oh, there's a legacy. I did a thing that's going to be seen. But when Joy died, I realized that the most important legacy, and this is what I spoke to my daughter about in one of our conversations, is to be remembered with love. You know, she said to me one day, it was one of those deep questions that an 11-year-old says to you when they can't sleep. What's the point of life if it just ends? You know? And I was like, holy crap. All right, then I need to sit down. Right, let's have a little chat about this. It's a big question, darling. And I said, well, all right, I'll tell you what the point of life is. You know how since Mummy died, whenever anyone talks about her, they smile and say, oh, do you remember that time when she did this and did that? And whenever they think about her, they think about her with a smile, and they talk about her smile and her laugh, and that's what they remember about her. I said, that's the point of life. Be the person that makes other people smile when they remember you and makes their life a little bit better by you being in it. That's the point. And I think that is the legacy that is important on top of everything else. You know, it's all going to go eventually. All our artwork will be gone. There'll be a time when nobody remembers all this shit that we do, which is great. And it's lovely we do it now. And I'm so grateful that people like what I do, what you do. One day that will be gone, you know. But if there's a chain of people down the line that remember us as a person, and that group will get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, it doesn't matter. That's the legacy that really counts.
I don't think there's a million questions that we could ask, but I think that's just such a perfect note to end it on. I mean, we just discussed the meaning of life, so ask you about. So, how did you get started drawing? It's other than that. So, Gary, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Where can our listeners find you to interact with you? Because I'm sure they're
the best place is probably either Twitter or Instagram. I am at Gary Scribbler on both of those. I'm on Facebook as well, where you can follow on there, but it's the same stuff. So probably Twitter and Instagram are the best place to go to, at Gary Scribbler. And I have a YouTube channel now, which is also Gary Scribbler, one word, capital G, capital S, Gary Scribbler. And on there, I'm putting little films that me and the kids have been making little films during lockdown, and they've been going up on there. And I've been doing some live drawing sessions, which I've recorded, and they've gone on there as well. So it's bits and pieces, just stuff to entertain and make people smile, really. So that's where you find me.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.